I have been using all this while. I have even then made my own raw material and made some of my own machines. And so when I say I can do it already, I'm only just going to get certified, right? So what was I doing? I thought that we couldn't be importing everything that we used. We couldn't always be a consuming country. As such, could we make some of these things? So I took my digital skills, which is I can look at someone's pretty face and model it on a computer and generate a file. And I'll send that file to a machine called a 3D printer. And to give me a plastic version of that person's look. Now, I have then used that to make spare parts of cars, grills, some bumpers, some consoles for electronic devices. But hey, we're talking about sustainability today. And as it turns out, we don't have as much plastic as we would like to have for such operations. So I say, how do I still use the wonder of this technology to create impact around us and answer the questions that we must answer for ourselves? When I think of sustainability, I think about my great-grandmother, I think about my mother, I think about my grandmother, my mother, and then like that, and then my own children, what am I going to hand over to them? And we've got to really clarify in our minds what sustainability means to us. For me, I think I have found it, and I think that it sits in protection, shelter. You've got to live a healthy, decent life. So I take my digital skills and I say my grandfathers and my ancestors will use or will live in mud houses. They will build these things that they will live in, and they will drink water from clay earthenware pots. They're very cool. I can talk through the benefits of it in technical terms, thermal considerations, energy costs, right? But at the end of the day, if you will sleep at night and sometimes wake up and feel differently from how you felt the previous day. There's a quality to life, and even to our living habits and living practices. It also determines the kind of lives that we will lead. So for me, can we use this same technology? And here is what it is. When I mentioned before that I can look at her face and model it, all I'm doing is taking the same math and trigonometry we did in school, and I'm plugging coordinates that the machine can read, and so that it can interpret it and then make motion in accordance with those coordinates that I have plotted on my. She mentioned quite a bit, and I was happy to hear what she was saying because I could relate. I mean, it's the same spatial thing. They're just applying it to agriculture, right? In my own space, I do it in housing. And so I will then say, I want this house to be 50 meters tall or 5 by 5 in size. And we're literally pouring, it can be a mix of sand and some resin and some fiber, depending on how strong we want to make the house. We can make the walls thick or make it a little light, right? And we can make the walls even bulletproof. If you remember, they will say those houses that our grandfathers lived in or our ancestors lived in were bulletproof. So I'm asking myself, how do we leave this kind of value for what we're doing right now that is actually very, very expensive? It's not even as safe, right? As such, and I haven't even mentioned what is interesting about this. To build a house today, you will be spending, millions of naira. But I'm telling you that to run a 3D printer, you only need the printer, and you maybe even just need a solar panel. So that as opposed to building a house with millions, and then, how many of us here are conversant with carbon credits or carbon footprints rather? Right. The carbon footprints from extracting limestone alone, let alone when you then come into the building environment and the environmental degradation. I don't know whether anyone has ever been close to a cement factory. Right. Right, Eweko, thank you. You don't even want to stay there for 5 minutes. So think about, and that's how I think about this. I showed you the video of the mud dauber of the wasp, and there's a picture of a wasp here, typically building its hive, and it typically will take little bits of mud and starts to dump it one after the other, and gradually it builds a habitation for itself. It's the same thing I'm doing with a 3D printer. I'll walk you through with a 3D printer. But now we're saying, so there's an area called AEC, Architecture, Engineering, and Construction, married with spatial concerns, as she's mentioned before. Fantastic things can be done. And so the machine, like I said before, lock these coordinates in your design. You have a pump somewhere that has a hose connected to it, and your machine has been fed that file that you have created, so that once the pump starts to pump and the head of the 3D printer, which will typically move according to the coordinates of what you have designed, starts to move, it's actually pumping out whether it's cement you've mixed, whether it's clay you've mixed, and you have in X amount of hours a full built house, erected house. So bricks, and so they will pour mud in a container, and then they have all these bricks and they layer them one after the other. The only difference here is that you are synchronously pouring that same mud as opposed to laying brick after brick. Even the houses we live in right now, you're laying one block after another, but now you have a slurry that pours out of a nozzle and it is going round and round. Now let me go away from fantasy or all of these digital things and say, I mean, are we really safe in the houses we live in? Do they have to be this expensive? Do we have, and have we always practiced building this way? And so why did we leave building this way? If one, cost-wise, it is more expensive to do what we're doing right now. Safety-wise, we're safer living and building this way. I mean, I don't know why else we will be doing what we're doing. So you ask me why now. The answer to that question is cost, really. I'm looking at a future where you, or people who are leaving universities are targeting jobs that pay X amount, and we can then say, okay, we are guaranteed that this crop of people, say 22,000 graduates, are going to get or earn this amount of money upon graduation. Can we say we get a percentage of, some kind of mortgage system, get some fraction of their income that goes into their housing? Can we also bring in the women in the hinterlands and in the villages who would support the mixing of this slurry, so that they are also contributing? And we've seen some of those models already exist and they're being executed currently. Can women and children support or be part of the process of house building by making the slurry, so that what we're doing is buying off them and they earn something for that? As it is now, Nigeria is in the top 3, at least according to data, is in the top 3 of countries with the highest housing deficit. Affordable housing being the solution. Where does the answer to affordable housing lie? It only lies in this kind of building. So can we build structures? Can we build 30 carcass houses, and everyone can then decide how they want to furnish the inside of it? You know, and then you are guaranteed that you have shelter that is safe, is healthy, is not too expensive. So that's what I'm presenting to you, and that's the story I'm telling to you today. I will go further to show you. In this picture, you can see the very old huts. Now, with the technology that I'm talking about, we are starting to see houses like this because you have precision, like she mentioned before. There's precision in building right now, and you're using the same mud and clay and things like that. But if you say you don't want to use mud, you could also be pouring cement. The choice is really, but then the cost factor will then vary. Okay, that's where I had my... Right, this was the traditional way of building with bricks, right? Adobe, you layer them one after the other. And it's used to build fantastic buildings. Oh, sorry, you're looking at that. I'll go back for your own sakes. Right, okay. And then, of course, the Yoruba people will call it amu. They drink from this. The water is cold, you don't have to... And these are some more modern buildings being used to build, yes, so the housing developments. Now, this is also 3D printed. You can actually coat it, paint it as you like, and you have a fantastic, again, it depends on your own taste. You will eventually furnish your house to your taste. And these are more modern structures built out of this same technology. So that's my story to us today and what I'm sharing with us today. We're talking about running agriculture smarter and using drones and the efficiency that comes with that, and how you can get data out of that, and how you can be very specific. But it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop with farming. It goes into housing as well. It goes into our food, how we... the other day I was on this seminar, and someone took this device that he pointed at a piece of like a plank, and on the back of that device it was shown exactly where that tree came from, how old the tree that plank came from. And so that's where data science and all of the AI that we're doing is... I think I sum it up as being more intentional, being clear about what you want to do. Let me give an example. This is a chair that is covered in black. Let me define it in a different way. I need something that can carry 50 kgs and is made of a material that even come rain, come shine, it will still be there. All I'm talking about is a chair, and that's how data science breaks down things. So simplification. And so when I say, think about it as the essentials of functionality, and then try and build creativity and art around it. And of course, remember your health and sustainability. And at the end of the day, you will be talking things like this. So, if you have any questions at this point, I will be happy to listen to whatever may have cropped up in your mind. But I heard her ask, your name please? Precious. I heard Ms. Joymo ask Precious the other time how she got into this. I will say that really, as far as you can imagine, she said she wasn't an agriculturist from the word go, but as far as your imaginations can drive you, ask those questions around you as to how this, how that. And that's how my own journey is. I have been in this for close to 10 years. I've been building plastic, like I said, and now we are reapplying it to other areas to answer the questions that Nigeria must really give solution to, and housing is central to that. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to take that. But meanwhile, I think I've run through what a 3D printer does. I've run through what can happen with it. I've run through how I've run through some aspects of sustainability. I've run through some aspects of the costs of living and building, and those are the frames around my own area of application of this technology that we all have access to. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for the presentation, and I was really interested to listen to you. Because personally, I've also developed interest in green homes or eco homes, but I've come to understand that adoption is slow in Nigeria, and people are not really aware about it. Also, there's monopoly of design. You know, before we started building with cement and sand, it took a lot of time when that technology came in. Now, how can you, let me use this word, okay. How can you demystify the process to the common Nigerian on a better way of constructing, or because this matter has to do with developers, real estate developers, those that build houses. 80% of all the houses we all live in now in Lagos or outside Lagos are built with sand, cement, and blocks. And we have big players. How can you change people's mindset from building green homes? We know that the advantage of it is you reduce energy. When there's weather, when there's heat period, you have to use AC. So is it possible for you to break down the costs of building, for example, a 3-bedroom apartment or a 1-bedroom apartment using green materials? And there's something I would even like to discuss with you after. So, but my main question is, how can people change easily to start having that mindset? Oh, they don't want to, because the first thing that comes to their mind is sand, cement, and stone. And how can you overcome the monopoly of the cement producers, which everybody sees as the common way to build houses? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There's a second video I have here, and it speaks to the economics of it. I can't give you a rounded figure of how much it costs to build a 3-bedroom apartment for various factors. There's something called scale. For certain things to be profitable, you have to run that scale. So if you tell me a standalone house, it will be more expensive to build a standalone house than to build 5 houses that are close by one another. So, and for me, I think the main point here is affordable housing. It has to be affordable. For us to meet that number that has to make sense, we've got to think about it holistically as against individually. So the other question about the monopoly of, for instance, the cement makers, I'm happy to inform you that one of the biggest players in this space is Holcim, the same Lafarge. And Lafarge has a 3D printing cement mix that is already on the shelves. So even they are beginning to shift gradually to adopting this technology to building practices. The costs of it, and there are projects in Kenya, Tanzania that are already coming up, but housing, yes, and see, for everything there's a demand and supply frame attached to it. So the more, I'm not only here because I want to tell a story, I'm trying to ignite the realities of this in your minds, so that when you want to build your houses, you're demanding for this, because when you start to demand for it, then the producers will start to bring it to the fore, right? So everyone is a stakeholder in this. We can have a conversation later to go specifically into things the curiosities you have, but as to specific numbers for a 2-bedroom flat or a 3-bedroom flat, I can't give that answer to the specificity of 1 house, 2 houses. I will think about it in frames, and those frames have factors. If I can get those factors from you, then I can give you the answer. Even when you come to my factory today and ask me, oh, I want to make a piece of plastic that I cannot give you the numbers, I'll give you an example. You can come to me and say you want an item that is 2 by 2 by 2, that's the size. However, you don't need it to be more than the thickness of it to be more than 5 mm or 10 mm. Someone who is building the same dimension of stuff can cost differently simply because his own requirement doesn't need it to be as thick as the other person. So it's something called wall thickness. So every situation is specific, right? I cannot give abstract or general numbers, and I'm sure she might be able to relate to some of these things as well. It's very detailed, right? But we can talk later on. There was another question I wanted to ask. Oh, slurry is typically, material science has improved quite. Originally, it was clay and a bit of some resin. It will be interesting to remind you that even the mud dauber you saw there, it injects some of its own, some things from its own body into that clay that he's bringing up. So we synthesize some of these chemicals and then mix it with the slurry. But I think first of all is to have smooth, consistent slurry, and then we can then put all the other additives to make it. Or in other cases, we put some fiber as well. It depends on the nozzle you're using. Yeah, I'll take your question.
Sorry, thank you for the good presentations. It's very inciting. I'm just curious about the availability of the materials itself, sustainability of those of the materials of those houses. The last one is that, have you built sample or you have built something like that before, and maybe in Nigeria that we can just take a look like they can be able to predict the formulation of that adoption.
Right after I finish speaking, I will play what's on my computer because it answers to much of what you're saying. But to give word to what you've asked, first question, is it sand or clay we're using, you said? The raw materials, yes. I mean, while I was in design school, there was graphics, textile, and ceramics. And in ceramics part of it, we will typically go to some area where there is a dump of clay. The soil there is clay. And we will have to soak the clay for a couple of days. After we just we will then grind it. We take a sieve and sieve it. It's a similar process. So it's a soil that you have at the back of many places that you use for this. There's different soil chemistry that have different abilities, and so we select depending on the use case the kind of soil we're going to use, and also determine the kind of resins that we're mixing with it. So as to raw materials, the things we find around us that we're going to turn around, mix, and then we have what we can use. Again, depending on the use case, we want our wall to be blast proof. Some walls don't need to be blast proof. It will determine the kind of mix that we're going to use. As such, again, these are sustainable materials that we will pick from our environment and do the necessary chemistry with it. And when I say chemistry, it's as basic as the food you cook in your house, in your kitchen, is some chemistry. There's nothing out of this world about it. It's that basic. You just know that if you take a sample of that soil, you can run a test to know how much adhesion it has, how much porosity it has, and all of those factors are the things that, lead to the choice of material. And like I said, they're all around us. So that's to answer that question. As to, what was the other question you asked?
Yes. When you say sustainability in this context, my mind goes to how we're protecting the earth. Is it damaging the earth? Is it of any injurious considerations to other life forms? That's what I'm going to think about. Availability, we have that, but as to whether we are endangering other life forms around us or even ourselves, it's very minimal. When you go and dig soil from the back of your house, I don't know who you are harming with that. So it pretty is. Yes. Yes. Okay. Right. Right. Yeah. Let's understand something. Anything we use in this life is given by nature, is man-made, and man-made means that you've employed technology or some processes to refine it. So you're asking yourself, haven't used it for maybe you make it today and use it for 5 years. After 5 years, does it then become dangerous to the environment? The process you used to make it, was it dangerous to the environment? Those are the questions you're asking. Know that everything is gotten from nature in the first place. So when you say in the villages there's erosion, I mean, I have seen people take the same clay I mentioned just now and turn it into slabs and slates, and they fired it. And it doesn't cause any harm at the end of the day. So if you have areas where there will be a gully, you layer those troughs or tiles there, and it helps to either channel or whatever. So, I mean, what I'm talking about here is a complete shift from cement that has high carbon footprints to what is more sustainable, which is soil. But then it's also a matter of choice. If governments and people demand and are fine with using cement, then the same technology can be used to pour cement as opposed to clay, which so it really is a matter of choice what we want to do. Have I answered the question?
You answered the question to availability. I was going to ask what's the availability of this clay, because we know that we can only get clays from villages and all of that. So I think you answered the question a bit, and also how to introduce this new technology into the market between the cement and whatever. Okay, so now this is it 3D printing? You call it 3D. How does it look like? How does it really operate?